Is this an adventure or what? We don't need unexplained phenomena. I hope you guys are enjoying this journey we're taking you on. I know you come expecting to hear about big cats, cryptids, UFOs. We will touch on some of that, but I think it's worth sharing some of this for you, don't you? There's only 2 living souls up here today.
Because I can see it in my mind, I can see it in my head what I saw, but I can't describe.
Our eyes was closed, like a brightish light in my face, and I just felt paralysed.
Someone said there's something out there, so we had a look. It looked like a walnut. That's the only way I can describe it.
It was like it had loads of tiny little windows all over it, and it had lights in those windows, but not a light that illuminates.
Anyway, we were ushered into this lounge. This fella come in, he said, whatever you saw was a weather effect.
And everything is deathly silent. There's no sea, there's no wind, there's no night noise, because, you know, there's foxes all over here. There's nothing.
There's nothing. Hello, everybody. Hope you've all had a good weekend and welcome to Truth Proof. And you've got me and Roy Teague, Inspector Roy Teague, for next at least hour, probably 2 hours. So I think you're going to enjoy what Roy's going to share with us. And we'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, questions in capitals, please. And there's Gemma's moderating and Lee's moderating. As always, respectful. We can disagree, but if you're disrespectful, then you're not staying long on live stream, are you? So great to see you all tonight, and thanks for support, guys. As always, I see numbers just going up and up all the time in here, so it's brilliant. Well, just before we bring Roy in, we'll just have a look. We've got Gemma doing moderating, and Lee, I think we've got Banana Joe in, Mansing, Gillian Hurst, Stargazer, Janice. We've got Gemma there. Good evening. I think Linny's in, Mrs. Linny, Mia Girl, Drew Hollings, Dragonborn. Good to see you, Dragonborn, and Susan. And we'll do a bit more of a name shout out throughout the stream, but we concentrate on our guest really, because it's all about what he's going to share with us tonight. And as I said, I'm speaking to Inspector Roy Teague, police inspector, obviously, and investigator and author of UFOs and Unexplained Phenomena. And, you know, it's strange because the amount of police officers that have been up onto those cliff tops with me and expressed an interest in Unexplained is, well, it's eye-opening, to be honest with you, and it's refreshing as well. So his particular focus is police officer reports, and I should imagine it reaches out to other services as well. But it's not the first time Roy's been on. I was surprised it's 3 years ago, but I'll just bring him on now. So, Roy, welcome to Truth Proof.
Hello, Paul. Great to be on the show again, mate.
Absolutely great. And I was surprised when I looked, and it was 3 years ago. But what you've been doing in that time? You're collecting reports or?
Collecting reports and going grey. So if you look at the last time you interviewed me, I had really good dark stubble, and I'm coming at you with some grey stubble now, mate. But yeah, I'm good.
That's life. But as I say, this is this book you've just written, the first book, and it's really interesting. And did you deliberate a lot before thinking, right, I'm going to go it alone and I'm going to put this book out, because you're in a job where everything's scrutinized, and here you are talking about UFO reports, and they should be spoken about. Genuine people are seeing these things. How long did it take you before you thought to yourself, yeah, I'm going ahead with this?
It was a while, I'll be honest with you, because of the stigma and the ridicule that's attached to the subject, and the fact that I am still serving in the police. Probably not the most popular subject to write a book about, on the basis that for all the wrong reasons. I think a lot of these sites are associated with people who've got mental health issues. They're not believed. So when you've got a serving officer coming out and speaking about these things openly, it is a little bit frowned on by the organization, so to speak. However, it's never been treated, in my opinion, with the respect that it deserves.
Yeah. And
after interviewing a whole bunch of officers, one or two of the encounters that I got told about were so profound. I thought, how am I going to keep these to myself? The public need to know about these, and what the public need to know is that it isn't just Joe the plumber and Fred the carpet fitter that are experiencing and seeing these things. Not that they're any less important than police officers, because they're not. What I am saying is that I want people to know that police officers are also seeing these extraordinary things above the skies of the United Kingdom, as well as anybody else, and not just in the the skies above the United Kingdom, but the rest of the world. And I think we need to sit there and have an open, honest discussion and some open dialogue about it. But some of the accounts I got, I thought, how can I keep these myself? Do you know what? I'm going to come out the UFO closet. I'm going to put them in the book. That's exactly what I did. I called the book Close Encounters of the Police Kind, which obviously is a play on the film by Spielberg. And the reason I called it that is simple fact that you're going to know before you see a picture of the cover what the book's about. And it kind of speaks for itself. So it took quite a long time to put together. I interviewed about 250 police officers. There's about 75 accounts in the book. And obviously they're going to be the most intriguing and perplexing cases. And I've put them in date chronological order, so they make sense. I'll start the first case in 1966 with a PC Stenner, and I end it in 2005. So it's been a bit of a labour of love, and it's a long time to complete.
Do you see it growing? Are you already collating more information for another book, or were that forming as you were writing this first one?
The latter. It started to form as I wrote that first book, on the basis that when I started to appeal for witnesses, and I did it on the BBC, various social media platforms, I got a really, really good response. But I did have quite a few from people in other emergency services, for example, the NHS.
Yeah.
So, and a couple of people in the military, pilots, so on and so forth. So, although police officers make great witnesses by virtue of the training, so do a lot of these other people that are also in the service of the Crown. But I'll be honest with you, Paul, if anybody sends me an email, whatever job they're in, I'll always answer the email. I'll always speak to them. Yeah.
And do you know, we used to do a lot of observations up in a place called Cottam on East Yorkshire Wolds. It'll make sense in a moment. And odd times, farmers would find us suspicious. You parked in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes I'd go up in my work van, which were a white Vauxhall Vivara van. What they up to? Are they trying to take farm equipment? So police would get called. And on some occasions, the police would turn up, and they were so enthusiastic and so interested and tell us what they'd seen. And on other occasions, I suppose it's like with any pastime or any job, you'd get people not hostile, but really, this thing don't take, none of this exists. What are you doing out here looking for things like that? And I think maybe you've got to have an experience, Roy, or really have faith in person who's telling you, if you've never had it yourself, to take it on board, haven't you?
There is the case for that. However, I would push back on that to anyone that says that, and I would say that 95% of the population of this planet believe in a deity of some kind, whether that's whatever god that may be. Now, there's no evidence of that apart from the good book. Yeah. But that was written 2,000 years ago. It's been adjusted over lots of times over hundreds of years. So, but nobody will question that, and there's no evidence really. But yet I'm coming at you with a phenomena that has got evidence, for example, CCTV, sworn affidavits, testimonies, forensic evidence. You've got leaked videos now that have been released by the Department of Defense and the Pentagon via, the Arrow investigations. So I'm coming at people with that evidence, whereas religion, there isn't any. And I'm not mocking religion. And
that's belief, though, Roy, isn't it?
Well, that's faith. Well, that's
blind faith. We've been disrespectful to people of faith. You've no more proof of this than what I'm telling people we've seen and experienced, or Roy, or some of your witnesses, really.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is that I've got no issues with that, because I've got my own beliefs as well. But there's no evidence of that. But there's evidence of so you can get mocked for believing in sort of UFOs and the paranormal, but you're not mocked for sort of religion when the evidence is a lot less than the paranormal and UFOs.
Yeah, I get it. So Roy, when you're compiling all these witness testimonies and you're putting it all together, did you have any repeat areas, places where things had been seen on a regular basis? Or
yeah, I mean, the A66 fared quite a few times up north near Cumbria. That fared a few times. The A14 going towards Suffolk and Rendlesham near Bury St Edmunds featured a few times, but
years in between.
Say again, sorry. Yeah, many years in between.
Years in between, but it's still an area where you're getting a report and you're thinking, oh, go on, let me just go back through my records, and I've got another one here in 20 years ago, and it's
Yeah, I mean, and you can also, when you get the report, you can just jump onto, Google and have a look and see what else has come up, whether it's been seen by police officers or whoever, and how close that was to the report you've just picked up, and was it years before, years later? So you can do your research there and find out if it's a hot spot, so to speak.
So what case really gripped you when you were doing this, or are they all interesting? Don't say all, Roy, because otherwise we've finished the interview.
We'll never finish it. I mean, look, they're all intriguing, but of course you've got some that are more, pardon the pun, out of this world than the others. But there's a few that really made me sit back and think, what? Can you tell me that again? Confirm you've just said this. And the one that sticks in my mind straight away was there's a guy called PC Hammond, and it was July 5th, 97. He's on board a police helicopter, with a David Hammond, who's an army warrant officer, and they're with London. And the reason they're there is because there's a huge demonstration on, so it's public safety reasons. Okay. And as the helicopter banks over to the right, they notice an object in the sky. They describe as like a huge craft, 40-50 meters long, but it looks like a paper aeroplane, a dart type shape you would make in class at school, and it's a restricted airspace. They've got very strict flight rules up there. So they get onto the control room and in turn get off to Heathrow and Gatwick and say, what is this thing up here? And they're told there's nothing up there, you're on your own. Well, of course that makes them think, well, they get a bit excited, and the heart rate starts going, because clearly they aren't alone. So they start circling this unidentified craft, for want of a better word, like a gunslinger would go around his opponent before drawing in a shootout. And as they stop, they're looking at this object through the FLIR, which is the forward-looking infrared camera. And as they're doing that, the back of the object heats up. It shoots forward about 40-50 meters. And I can only relay what the officers have said. A sort of hole opens up in the sky. This thing flies into it, and then it closes up behind them, and it's gone. Now, of course, they discussed that on the flight on the way back to Lippets Hill, where they're based. And they want to speak about it, but they're too afraid to, because 18 years before, a guy called William Humphreys had been in a helicopter, and he'd been involved in an aerial pursuit of a UFO. And that ended up near Bondesbury power station.
Right.
And that thing then eventually shot up into the atmosphere. Now, he did speak about it, that officer, and he ended up being grounded because of it. And he was then interviewed by the RAF, and he said to them, what was it I saw? And the RAF said, well, what you've seen is a small probe from a much bigger craft higher up. Now, and I'd just like to also thank, while I'm here, John Hanson for giving me that last story, because John Hanson interviewed William Humphreys before he sadly passed away. So I mention that because it corroborates and it bolsters the account for the two officers that I interviewed. So because of what happened to William Humphreys and the stigma, he was ridiculed for 18 years. And the officers, PC Hammond in particular, he didn't want to be ridiculed for the next 18 years of his life. So they all kept stum about it. But he's absolutely adamant, and I've interviewed him a couple of times about it now in the last year alone, and he's saying that's what happened. It was like a sort of a portal, hole in the sky. I can't really describe it because it's something beyond us, but it happened. Yeah, and it was, and also with that, it's corroborating evidence by the army officer David Hammond. So it's a really good case, and that's one of many. So
and what
when
year
you're hearing things like that, it's really intriguing, mate, and people need to know about these things so we can discuss
absolutely them. Right. What year was that?
That was 1997, Saturday, July 5th, 1997.
It's brilliant, because this is all about Roy, but when you were describing it, it took me back to 1966, and a guy called, I'll not say his surname, it's Rob, he lives in Bridlington still. And as a young boy, just keep it brief, they were chopping trees down for firewood, where Bridlington Hospital now is. And they saw a flash of light in the sky, and when they looked up, there's a wedge, like a piece of cheesecake, on its side, just hung in the sky.
Very similar description.
And as you were describing it, and he said, I got our lad, is what he said, and I dragged him under edge with me because my dad had gone mad if I hadn't to tuck him back, and they're watching it. He says, and it moved in jerky movements, and then it just shot off like an arrow, well, or a dart. And as you were saying it, I thought, wow, that does sound like what Rob described to me, do you know? So that's fascinating. Are we all right to drop some questions in here, Roy, in between? Because there's one here.
Fill your boots, Paul. Fill your boots.
Right. So Andy H, and Andy's been on live streams. Good to see you, Andy. Right. Do the police keep an official or unofficial record of sightings and encounters?
Well, I mean, they used to, because there used to be a daily occurrence book at all the police stations, and there used to be SOPs, standard operating procedures, where if that was reported, we would then, if we were able to, because there weren't 999 calls incoming, if we could go and have a look, we would. It'd be written up in the daily recurrence book, and then the protocol then was to then contact the RAF and fill out a report. Now, to the best of my knowledge, that just does not happen anymore. So the police will say, oh, it's not a police matter. But they would say it's a military matter, because if something's coming into our airspace and we can't do anything about it, that's a security matter that is down to the government and the military to investigate, as opposed to the police. There are some occasions I would disagree. For example, when people say they've been victims of abduction, because I would argue a crime has been committed then.
Yeah.
But unless it's an abduction, then 9 times out of 10, Paul, it's sad, but in the last 5 or 6 years, we've become completely reactive to 999 calls. That proactive element, in my professional opinion, has gone from the police. There aren't enough of us to go out. So, if a call comes in about a UFO, I can pretty much guarantee we've probably got another 5 or 6 calls, 999s, burglars,
more important, yeah.
And we're going to end up going to those, unless it's something that's above a school and there's a public safety issue, or above a motorway. It would be probably well down the pecking order. So we don't actually keep records, to the best of my knowledge, anymore, which is it's a shame, really.
It is, isn't it? Because there's potentially a bank of evidence that could have been building up over years, isn't there? So as a police officer, you're trained to deal with evidence then, Roy, and we know that most of the evidence is sort of trapped in people's minds when it comes to UFOs, the visual, and then what's contained in the mind. So has investigating UFOs changed the way you think about evidence?
I mean, it's different to when you investigate crime, because 9 times out of 10, it's not a crime, it's just a sighting. But I have got my own, I call it a methodology of investigation. And it's very difficult a lot of times to investigate UFO sighting, because if there's no CCTV, there's no forensics. No, you're just kind of going on that person's word. But my principles, I always start off with the ABC principles, which is accept nothing, believe no one, and check everything. I mean everything. And I've got a thing, so I'll take the statement, I'll listen to what they've got to say. And I've got like a tick off list. There's about 50 or 60 things on there: drones, meteorites, birds, planets, which planets are, by the way, one of the most misdiagnosed things for UFOs. So, of aircraft, Chinese lanterns, you get it. Now, it's very rare that you can write all of those off. You might be able to say it probably wasn't a plane, but it's very difficult to not prove it is. But Paul, on those rare occasions where I can look at that list and I can say, if as the statement required to me what was accurate, if I can state beyond a reasonable doubt that everything on my tick off list was not what the person saw, that's when I'll move on to the second thing, which is secret military craft being tested. And again, how do you discount that? Because we are a clever race. Now, we can create craft that goes like up to Mach 7 with like an unmanned drone. We can the fastest craft we've developed is a HGV. That's not a heavy goods vehicle, that's a hypersonic glide vehicle. Unfortunately, it's a Russian nuclear missile. It goes at Mach 21. It's about 22,000 miles an hour. So we can build things that do extraordinary speeds. So how do you prove that it isn't something that we've built and it isn't secret military craft? And that you can only really disprove that if the object does crazy things that we can't do, like
As in manoeuvres.
right angle turns,
Mm.
or if the craft is at a complete standstill, it does something like bullet exit. And I don't mean building up a speed. I mean from here to here in thousands of miles an hour, because we can't do that. There'll be a build-up of afterburners or jets. Now, if you can write off all of the things on my tick off list, and you can write off secret military testing, that's when I'll go to the Arthur Conan Doyle saying, written by who wrote Sherlock Holmes. And what he said was this: he said, if A and B are impossible, whatever remains C, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. So if it's impossible that it's anything on my list, if it's impossible that it's secret military craft under testing, then all that remains, C, a craft of non-human tech, must be the truth. But it takes me a long time to get there, and it's very difficult. So of the 250 people I've interviewed, I would suggest, if the evidence and the statement is as described by the officer, I would suggest there are 7 or 8 out the 250. I am absolutely stone bonker if they're telling me it is as described, that what they've witnessed is non-human tech. But it takes a lot to get there.
Absolutely. And obviously probably not for this book, Roy, but if we were to go back into annals of time and look at some of these reports, we can rule out military tech.
We sure as hell can, on the basis that we weren't as well developed back in the day, were we?
That's correct. So let me I've got a question here. Oh, this is for me, but I'll just address it because it's easy enough. Because it's kind of surprising. Last week you mentioned a psychic told you would die without knowing. Has it had any psychological effect on you? No, to be honest, Jay. It was just a strange thing for somebody to come up to me and say, "Excuse me, can I have a word with you?" And I've never met him before, and so it hasn't had an effect on me. It kind of made me laugh at first, but what do you do? Right. Let's just move down a bit, Roy, just in case that we've got any more, because I want it all about you, to be honest. What a theory for it. What's been right? Rick Allen says, and I'm assuming it's to Roy. Do you put forward a theory for what's been seen?
In some cases, yes. When I give talks, when it comes to the book, I'll answer obvious questions. But it was impossible to give an answer and a theory on all 75 in the book, because that would have taken up so much space in the book. I'd have probably only got half the sightings on, and then put my rationale at the end of them. So, but there are a few obvious, really intriguing ones where I have put my theory. What I plan to do at some point is I'm going to create a website, and I'll just turn it off.
It's okay.
Sorry. Live TV. I'm going to create a website, and that'll be www.policingtheunexplained.com. And what I'll do is I'll be putting them on there.
Absolutely, that's brilliant. Well, while we do this, because half the time I forget to advertise my own books, and this is about you. I want you even early. We'll do it again, but where can people find this book, Roy?
They can find the book on Amazon. And Waterstones and all sorts of places. So it's everywhere, mate. So Amazon, Waterstones, Google it. I think it's available from about 20, 30 different places.
Brilliant. So everybody can see that. And I've got to put another picture up because it's got Roy's email address on. If you've got any reports that you want to share, and you've heard Roy, you don't have to be a police officer to share any reports or accounts with him. And or myself.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, if anybody's, thank you. I was just going to say, you are a mind reader. So, there's the email address, contact@policingtheunexplained.com. And
we'll leave that up for a moment then, Roy. So, what about 75 reports in this book? What about any patterns that have formed? And I don't mean repeat areas. Are you seeing anything that's sort of, you think, that's happened in that case and that happened in that case? Are the officers reporting things like this descent into the lower silence? Are they reporting fear and a certain type of objects that's been seen associated with the fear?
No, I mean, I've had a couple say they were afraid, but most of the officers have said they didn't feel any fear. They felt the object was benign, knew they were there, but it wasn't going to cause them any harm. And to be fair, I got all sorts of descriptions of UFOs, from saucer shaped to cigar shaped, triangular, sphere. So you never know what you're going to get when you get the email.
So did those shapes change with the decades?
I mean,
as in, we jump to set 1960s and we'd be thinking flying saucers. You know where I'm going. So
I do, of course, yeah. So, excuse me. So I have noticed a difference over the years, in particular in the last 30 triangular craft. I think probably the majority of those are our own being tested, like, you know, the Stealth or the TRB-3 or the Aurora. But I believe that that there are many different types of non-human UFO tech that's out there. But I believe that those craft are used for different things. Now that we have planes in the skies above our, you know, our planet, we have fighter jets, crop dusting planes, commercial jets taking people to and from holiday. So they're all planes, but they're all used for different purposes. So I believe that, you know, some UFOs are for different purposes. Some are probably drones. Some maybe have got some crew on board. Some have got more crew on board. And who is to say that these craft are all made by one civilization? There could be several out there that are, you know, that are coming here. So I think different craft, different, you know, extraterrestrial biological entities have made them, and then the different craft in turn, different shapes and sizes for different purposes. This is, of course, this is just my assumption. I've got no evidence of it, but this is just what I think.
Well, that's not a bad way of putting it, Roy. And do you think then that they're extraterrestrial, or do you think that, because my opinion is that whatever we're seeing, because it's pretty regular, there's more people reporting things, they're already here. Do you think it's just that they've cracked another type of science, some exotic science, and they can just, there's no, I don't know, it's almost like it's a thought process away. People talk about the hitchhiker effect, and I just think it's a matter of concentrating, and whatever you've interacted with, it is with you, rather than something attaching itself to you. But you'll hear men of science say that these things can't possibly traverse the vast distances of the universe to get to us. It's just not going to happen. Well, it clearly is.
I think it is, and it has done, and it still does. So going back to the first part of your question, I think that there's two modes of transport of how they, for want of a better expression, get here. There's traversing the great distances of space and time, and I mean the nearest star, Proxima Centauri's, you know, 4.5 light years away. That's if you can travel at the speed of light, which we can't. It would take us 6,800 years to get there at our conventional speeds. So they've obviously conquered that, and I imagine they've done that via, you know, it's faster than light travel, or via wormholes, etc. Or there's the second theory where it's interdimensional and they can open a portal and just pop out here. I think once they are here, there's a myriad of places where they can hide, so they don't have to keep opening those doorways or traveling those distances. And we've got numerous reports of craft coming in and out of the oceans. Now the planet's covered 70% by water. We've had reports from the military that shows things coming in and out of the sea. They don't make a splash. They call them transmedium, you know, craft or transmedium technology. So I do think they're already here, hiding in plain sight at the bottom of oceans. There's even people who film these things coming out of volcanoes, if you can believe that. Places we cannot get to. So yeah, I believe they've conquered both, and they are already here, probably in the oceans.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. Obviously, we spend a lot of time on the edge of the North Sea, viewing the skies, viewing the land behind us, and out at sea. And on 3 occasions, doesn't mean we've filmed extraterrestrials, by the way, people, but on 3 occasions, we've filmed lights below surface at sea, and we've got them on film, you know, and, you know, during the night. So what it is, I don't know. That's the difficulty, isn't it? That's the great question that we're all asking, because there's always somebody going to be out there saying it could be bioluminescence. We're in North Sea. I don't think there's much chance of that, but I know it does occur.
It's just, unless you can absolutely rule out each case, you can never say it is, and that's why it's so difficult to prove each individual case. But there are those, you know, every now and again, those 1 or 2 come out, like the Tic Tac footage, that I think that's definitely non-human tech. So every now and again we do get something. But Paula, what I'll say is this: there have been hundreds of thousands of UFO sightings, maybe millions. All it takes is just one of those cases to be true, and the case is made out.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're talking to, you might not have access to be able to do this. So when you're taking a police officer report or somebody who works within the organisation, do you actively look for other reports from civilians around the same time period?
I would, yeah. I would. You could do Googling, and of course, I'll mention. If I've got nothing and I really wanted to think, is there anything at that same time? I'll probably bring up my good buddy John Anson, who I know who's got he's got a brilliant archive in Exhall, the Great British UFO Archive, and if there's been something seen on that date, he'll probably know. So if I don't get anything, I'll probably go to John and ask John.
John, yeah. I know he's got a triangle report from 1901. When you were talking earlier about potentially a lot of this kit's ours.
Yeah.
But we don't know sort of accuracy of the 1901 report. I realise that, but whoever's put the report in or put this information together has described a flying triangle. 1901. I think we can rule out anything from ourselves, can't we? In that year, anyway.
Yeah.
So I've got another one. I'm not sure we've touched on this already. Is there an official position of the police about these things?
No, we would just we would be passed on to the military, and we would say it was a military matter, unless somebody was injured or hurt. The police probably would not get involved in it. So there's no real official position.
Right.
We might comment on it, but there's no official position. The only things I've ever seen that the police have ever done, and they've not come out with an official explanation, is there've been a few NPAS tweets back in the day where their whatever helicopter, South Wales Police have put a couple on where they filmed something like an orb going across the British Channel, and what they've done is they've released the footage and they've said, "Any help, anyone?" ? So they're asking if people can identify it. So that was nice to see, and that was 2016, I think, the last one. So they haven't come out with an official answer, but occasionally we'll say, "Oh, we had this," and we'll put it out. But for us to come up with an explanation is as difficult it is for me or you to come up with an explanation.
Are there any reports, and I'm expecting like a yes, no, or can't say, are there any reports that you know of, Roy, that are absolutely brilliant, but you can't pursue them because, I don't know, you might be breaking some data protection, or it'd be a little bit too sensitive?
There are a few, and all I'll say, there's an incident at Birmingham Airport. And I investigated that, and I was encouraged to not investigate it anymore.
Yeah.
I will do, and I have done, and I might write about it when I'm free from when I'm free from the shackles of warrant card. But I'm not at the moment, mate, so I won't say.
No, that's good enough. I had yes, no, or cannot say. It's good enough, isn't it? What's this from Linny? Roy, do me and Paul get a book from you? Regards, the plug from Paul. No, I'd not even read the question there. Typical Linny. He comes on cliff tops with us. Right, let's have a look. Warm welcome and thanks for the support.
I just saw that. Was that Ian Linford?
Yeah.
Well, Ian, if you're watching, you know what? You absolutely will get a book.
Excellent.
That's my man from the Christ Church.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, it's all up there. Absolutely. I'll get me his address, Paul, and I'll send it him.
Yeah, I'll give him my address and I'll keep it. No, I'll definitely get it. It'll be with him whenever he send it out. I'll sort that after this stream. That's great. That Andy H, is there a dedicated? I think we've done this question, haven't we?
Yeah,
we've done this.
There isn't, unfortunately, there isn't.
Right, let's have a look. Al Durham. A66 is quite near me. We'll do boots on the ground if that helps. Do you know something? And I'm not just saying it, but when I read that from Al Durham, I'd take him up on that offer, because you'll not get nobody more diligent than that man. I saw a question earlier. I was going to say to you, I'll ring you later. Seriously, or are you just a solo? You don't want anybody else involved? He's not wanting to
No,
write
I'm
a book
happy.
here.
If something's happened up in an area of the country that I can't get to, or that's quite a distance, like Cumbria is, or Durham, and somebody's willing to assist me. I mean, I've had people do it before, and it saved me a lot of hassle. You know, can you go and knock on this door and see if this person's in, or do you know where the previous occupants moved on to? I've had a few people do that, and it's really invaluable. So, you know, I would really appreciate that, and maybe we could, you know, speak after this, Paul, and you could link me in.
Oh, definitely, because you know something, we've got 330 people sat listening to this, Roy, and for the most part, everybody's absolutely spot on. They give us great support, but there's a few people when over years, and I've known Al years, and when he looks into something, he looks into it with great detail. So it'd be an asset for you. Let's have a look here. This is bit off. Roy, any police officers seen any big cats?
You know, I love the big cat stories, but I haven't, and it's very convenient. I can also mention that I moved on. Well, I haven't moved on from UFO sightings, but
that's what I was going to ask you. You're kind of a bit stuck in the UFO trench. So are we expanding?
I mean, that was my number one interest, but that's bled into other matters now because somebody mentioned, you know, instances of high strangeness. Now, since I've started collating these accounts, I've had police officers get hold of me to say, do you also investigate the paranormal? Do you also investigate X, Y, Z? So, but I haven't had a big cat, and I know that's a personal sort of favourite of yours, and wolf type things, Paul.
Fascinating,
yeah, they are. So, I mean, I've had, as I say, paranormal stuff, cryptid stuff, and I have had some very bizarre stuff, but I've not had a wolf man type, werewolf, wolfy thing type yet. But I'm sure at some stage I will.
Do you know, it's amazing because when I wrote the first book, Roy, the orange one behind me, I had no interest in the cryptid phenomena, should we say, at all. It was just the newspaper. They put a little article in for me, and I wanted strange stories of unexplained, and I got a few from round Flixton. And it's spiraled from there, and now we're getting. I think it's the boldness of people coming out and actually speaking about these things, and then other people sat in silence with what they've seen and potentially experienced, and then it's giving them a little bit more courage to come forward. Are you finding that with not just with the police, but with members of public as well? They're seeing that all the people stepping forward now, Roy, and sharing.
Yeah, and I think more people will now because it's easier to jump online, which we couldn't do 30 years ago, and you can find out you can find similar sightings. So you think it wasn't me being crazy. I saw what I saw because so many people have seen it. I mean, I had a guy who was on the Isle of Skye in a van going down a road, country lane with trees either side, and as he's coming to a sharp right-hand bend, he sees like he describes it as a half stag, half man. So the bottom half is like man, but the top half is clearly like a stag with outstretched arms with antlers, and he could see all the facial features, and his lights of his van are on it, and he can either brake, which he's not. He's so shocked he just keeps going, drives around the corner, and about 15 seconds later he turns to his wife and says, "Did you just see that?" And his wife said, "You mean that half man, half stag thing?" "Yes, I did. Keep driving." So, but a lot of the naysayers or people who disbelieve in this type of thing will always say, well, how could something like that hide for, thousands of years? But these things are intelligent, and we have had things that aren't very intelligent. Like we've had a shrew that was believed to be missing for 50 years, a shrew, and there's like hundreds of thousands of them. We thought they'd been missing for 50 years. There's all sorts of things. We thought there was a fish, I think it's called the coelacanth.
Oh, the fished it up, didn't they? A coelacanth or something like that.
Yeah, well, we believed it had been extinct for 66 million years. And this thing turned up, and there's loads of them. So the point I'm trying to make is, if you've got things that aren't particularly intelligent and we don't find them, can you imagine if there are creatures out there, cryptids, certain wolves, and all the rest of it, who are very cunning and very intelligent, and they know how to hide? Well, you know, they're going to do a lot better at hiding than other creatures that can't, but have done and been very successful at it.
Well, their superpower, if you want, sort of pardon the pun there, but their superpower could just be absolutely super stealth. Do you know what I mean? It's like you said, not forced to have what we'd consider great intelligence, but some things could have super stealth. But you know, when we've got this little place called Danes Dyke close to me, Roy, and the reports that are coming out of there are this bipedal wolf-type creature, and none of the people know each other. And I don't know. I think I've had about 9 reports now. Well, I know I've had 9 reports now.
Yeah. So are we supposed to believe that all those people that you've spoken to, are they all mistaken,
deluded,
lying,
having some psychotic episode? That's what people would. Yeah, that's what people would want you to believe, because I realise when I talk about it, I kind of look at the camera or look at the people and I'll say, I realise how ridiculous it sounds, but these are genuine people. Some of them are traumatised by what they've seen.
Yeah.
And as you know, Roy, and everybody in this chat knows, there's nothing to be gained by putting your head above parapet and talking about seeing something like that. It's a real difficult one. I've got a question here from. Well, first of all, what about your own sightings, Roy? You've had a sighting of your own?
I've never had a UFO sighting, ever. Right, it's just a passion I've always had. I've always believed there's something else out there. And I believe in the paranormal. I think there's a veil in front of us we just can't get through. But I do believe that every now and again, when the weather's right and the vibrations are right, or the energy or whatever you want to call it is right, that their vibrations and worlds sometimes just comes into ours as ours come, and just for a fleeting glimpse, sometimes of a second or 5 or 10, we just get to have a look at each other. Then the vibrations change, a bit like the signal for a TV. How you can turn, you can push a button, and in the same space as one channel, push a button, same space as another. And I think that's what happens sometimes when these things are seen.
Yeah. I think we're on a similar page, and I'm not expecting you to agree with what I'm saying now, but do you think, not just the vibration, I don't know what the correct words are, but sometimes if we're in a different emotional state, and I'm not talking about UFOs here, I'm talking about the paranormal, but we seem to be able to access things. And I've used this example many times when a time of somebody you love passed away and you're concentrating on them. A lot of the times, I don't know whether it's just, I'm not wishful thinking, but just some kind of imaginations, but you get people saying they've seen that loved one. And I wonder if they are doing. I wonder if it's all in here and we can actually connect with it if the state of mind is right.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, there's definitely something after we go. But obviously, the rules are whatever that is. They can't come back and physically come here and stand in front of us and tell us. But what we do know is that we're made up of energy, and it's scientifically proven that you cannot completely destroy energy. So when we go, there is a part of us that's left. Where does that go? And that's the big $1 million question. But I'm confident there's something, because otherwise, what's the point in us being here? What is the point? There's definitely something.
Absolutely. Right. I've got this one here. It's probably touching on what we've just said. What do you personally believe, Roy? So, you've just said it, haven't you? There's definitely something, but we don't know what it is.
Yeah. I mean, for UFOs, I went from being skeptical and on the fence to being quietly convinced, and now believe beyond all reasonable doubt that there is life. I mean, most people accept that there's probably intelligent life out there, or life out there. If you went to a different planet and there was a weed growing out of a rock there, well, there's extraterrestrial life, which is, but that's different to intelligent extraterrestrial life. Now, I believe there are vast civilizations out there, because there has to be, because the sheer number of stars out there. So for every grain of sand on this planet, there are about 10,000 stars that we know in the observable universe. So, and those are just stars, and there's planets around those stars. So there's got to be something else. Where a lot of people say, I'll accept all that. Where a lot of people have trouble is by saying, okay, I believe there's life out there, extraterrestrial intelligent life, but has that life continued, come here, and does it continue to do so? My personal opinion from all the people I've spoken to and the research I've done is that it absolutely does. Now, I know how that sounds. It probably doesn't sound crazy to the majority of the people that have tuned in, because I would suggest that 99% of the people that have are like-minded people like you or I, that can have a conversation about what is an awkward and a difficult subject. But most people in positions of power will never will never admit that, even if they believe it, because of the stigma that surrounds it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a shame, really, isn't it?
Do you know, I've met people at UFO conferences, obviously with the subject, they're investing time in it, and really high profile people. One of them, I'm not even going to say who he is, but he came up to me and asked for a copy of Night People. He said, but I wanted to read it, but he literally didn't show it to organisation that he worked for because he kind of conflicted with everything. I'll let him have a copy, to be honest. Right, what we got here? Hi, Paul Roy. PC Alan Godfrey's sighting in Todmorden, 1980s, an amazing report. Have you ever spoken to Alan Godfrey?
Yeah, I mean, Alan Godfrey, I met him in 2019 at a conference in Holford. Lovely guy, really nice. I'm aware of his, the alleged abduction, and I'm sure most people know, but obviously it occurred in 1980, November the 29th, 1980, potentially linked to the Adamski death 6 months earlier, where a body from Mr. Adamski was found on a coal heap. But I have met him, I've spoke to him, but if you read his book, Who or What Were They, about his UFO incident, he states that he had a bad time from leadership in the police, in particular some of the inspectors in the job. So, of course, he's got Inspector Roy Teague sending him a message saying, look, I introduced myself, I'd love to talk to you about it. And, he wasn't rude. He replied, then I would reply, but it was obvious that
very cagey.
He was very cagey. And you know what? I've got to respect that. If that's his decision, that's his decision. And I understand and I respect that. But he was not forthcoming for an interview or a chat for his own reasons, and that's absolutely fine.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Well aware of the case, and it's unusual because it's an on-duty potential abduction case of a police officer on duty. Yeah. However, just to throw in there, I have actually interviewed 2 officers myself, one off duty and one on duty, who are potential abductees themselves.
It's funny, we must be on the same page. I've just written abduction because I thought I'm going to be asking you about that. So obviously tell us as much or as little as you want, but or do you want to just expand on that?
Yeah, so I'll talk about PC Flanagan. So you mentioned the hitchhiker theory before, which is what you're alluding to is if you see a UFO once, then they seem to hitchhike onto that person, and they have multiple experiences. So I had one such person, PC Flanagan. He had an incident in, I think it was 78, where he saw a UFO emerge from the River Tyne and shoot off up into the sky. He had another one where he was with Sergeant Bob Walker on the A19, and some sort of orb followed, chased his vehicle down the A19 before zipping off down the A1. But the abduction case that occurred with PC Flanagan was in 81, and he was off duty in a car with his family, his wife, 2 children, and the dog. And as they came on the A14 through Bury St Edmunds, they came to a curve in a road, and just beyond it was a massive oblong craft, half above a cornfield and half above the road, about 20 foot above the road. So he knew he was going to be able to drive under it. And just before he did, and this thing has got some multicolored lights around it, it's then just disappeared. So it didn't fly off, it just disappeared in the blink of an eye. Now, as that happened, he was about to say, "Did you see that?" to his wife, but his wife was asleep, and the kids in the back of the car, and the dog. And then he felt incredibly drowsy, so he's had to pull over into a lay-by, because he said he would have crashed if he didn't. And he said to me, when you close your eyes, but you haven't been asleep long, if you're in front of the telly and you doze and then you quickly get your head up, but he said it was that type of thing. He's put his car in first, just driven off, and he's got home, and 2.5 hours of his life, he said, when he looked at the clock at home, 2.5 hours of his life were completely missing, and his watch had stopped from the time that he'd seen this thing. Now, of course, I'm thinking, well, what happened in the 2.5 hours? And so is he. And he said, before you ask, he said, I have often thought what happened. He said, I'm convinced something did. So I had mentioned regression to him, hypnotic regression. And he said to me, some things are best left unsaid, and I don't want to know. Now, we never mentioned this to his family, his kids, wife, or nothing, or nobody. Now, that's an intriguing one. But the next one, there's a lot more meat on the bones to this. And this is a guy who wants to remain anonymous. And again, I've got to respect that. So this is a guy, I've given the pseudonym of Officer F. Now, he was a 30-year veteran of Grampian Police, and it was October 89, and he stood on a driveway at Arboyne Police Station, and they're just about to drive off. He's with a colleague, and a call on the radio comes. There's an object being reported in the sky coming from the direction of Aberdeen, which is in the it's in the east. Can you get out and see if you can see anything? So the officer, it's 2 a.m. He thinks, okay. So he says in the microphone, yeah, no problem. He gets out the car and he's looking. Now he doesn't see anything, but what he sees coming towards him, in his words, is a rolling power cut. He can see the street lamppost going out, coming towards him, a bit like the scene off Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I suppose. But I've had several of these reports, and when the street light goes off right next to him, then his police car goes dead. At which point he and the colleague look up, and he describes it as a huge triangular matte black craft going over his head, about 50 foot by 50 foot by 50 foot, tip to tip to tip, and probably the same distance above his car, about 50 foot. They can't believe it. No noise, gliding effortlessly over their heads, and it goes off to the west towards a place called Ballater. And they lose sight of it in the sky because it's black and it goes into the black night sky. However, they knew where it was because they could see the rolling power cut continue on. And of course, very shortly afterwards, all the lights come back on.
I was just going to say, were they flicking up in sequence as well?
That's what he's just looked and they're all on. But you can see them blinking on as it's going away and blinking off as wherever it is in the distance. So he then gets the mic and says, that craft, whatever it is, it's just gone over my head. And the operator says to him, where the hell have you been? We've been trying to get hold of you for over 30 minutes. Now, it doesn't end there. So he said he doesn't remember being abducted in any way. No. So he was saying maybe time passes faster or slower near these things. He doesn't know. But then he has had headaches since then. So last year he goes and has an MRI, and the MRI has revealed a metallic object behind his right eye. So he's always believed that object has been there since he was a kid. Him and his sister were throwing lumps of coal at each other, messing about as kids when they're about 7 or 8 years old. And he gets struck in the side of the eye by a lump of coal. And he assumes that is what the little scar is as a result of. And then when the person has said there's something behind it, he thought, well, it'll be a piece of coal. But the doctor said, no, it's definitely metallic. So he goes back to his sister and says, hey, remember that lump of coal you threw in my face and it hit me? Well, there's a lump of coal I thought was behind there, but it's not. It's a metallic object. And his sister said, well, what coal fight? We've never had a coal fight. I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, well, we've spoken about it numerous times over the years. And so he said he believes he's had the memory of the coal fight and the subsequent memories of the conversations about the coal fight implanted into his head. And so because he's concentrating his thoughts so much about it, he had loads of vivid dreams when he was a kid about being awake in bed. And there were loads of like small beings around his table, but he couldn't quite see them. And that's continued throughout his life. And he just assumed there were dreams. But based on what he saw in 89, the MRI and the dreams, he believes putting them all together makes the aggregation of marginal gain, so to speak, in information intelligence. He believes that there's a possibility that he was taken at some point and has been a few times. A really nice guy, I might add. I've interviewed him probably 3 or 4 times. His account never changes. There's never a bit more added to it.
No.
So it gets bigger and bigger each time, which I've seen in a lot of famous UFO accounts. He's always been down the line. He just said, I can't answer the question. I asked him if he could get the object taken out, but they have said there's no point because we don't believe that is causing the problems with your headaches. But, you know, for something so big, I mean, could you go private and get it out? I mean, that's really interesting, isn't it?
It's really interesting, and I wonder what the actual doctors, the surgeons, or the people looking at the X-rays or are thinking when they look at this and they see that. I work with a joiner, Linny, who's knows his name, and he were having a lot of nasal problems. We worked hot weather and that, and he's struggling with his breathing and what have you. I don't mean in dire need, but he went and had some X-rays, and they found a little tiny, almost like a shotgun pellet, little pellet, metallic pellet, wedged up here, and no idea where it had come from. And he'd seen X-ray. I never saw it, but that's where he told me were there, and it was staying there. They weren't getting removed. But it doesn't mean it's alien related, Roy, does it? Let's face it, he could have done something silly as a little kid.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I always say, all I do is I relay the accounts of the officers to the reader or the listener, as it is in this case, and it's for the reader or the listener to come up to their own conclusion. So I never try and force mine one way or the other. I convey what I convey. I try and get out all the information off them, write it down. I think, well, what would somebody ask now? Oh, they might ask this. So I'll ask that question again. I'll put that into the account. And then it's down to each individual person to come up to their own answer. I mean, a lot of the times it's very difficult to say one way or the other. So you're just going to say it's inconclusive. We don't know.
Do you treat everybody as though they're telling you the truth unless there's little bits of doubt creep in? I mean, I'd still be polite to person, me, even if I start to doubt it, I just won't pursue it after that initial meeting.
Yeah, that does happen. I'm going to be honest. That has happened, and it's happened a couple of times. I've had people who tell me they're in the police, and I'm going to do my due diligence, aren't I? And I'm going to speak to someone who knows someone who knows someone, because I'm in that position where I can ask people in different forces. But I've had people who tell me they're in the police, and I've done inquiries, and they're not in the police, and they never have been. So if you're going to tell me some porky pies about that, then straight away the credibility for your account is also, going out the window. There's a few people I thought that just seems a bit too far for me. So, especially what we call some of the CE5 accounts. So the CE5 is close encounters of the fifth kind. Now, everyone knows the third kind. There's actually a close encounters of the first, second, third. So the first kind is where you see a craft less than 500 meters, but you don't know what it is. The second kind is less than 200 meters and you can make out a craft. The third kind is when you see a craft and the occupants of the craft, just like in the film. And the fourth kind is when you see the occupants of the craft and you have physical contact with them. That's the people who've been abducted. And the fifth kind, and the controversial one, is the we have been able to speak with extraterrestrial entities via the medium of our minds. And that's very hard to prove. And I've had a few of those. But how do I investigate that, Paul? It's very, very difficult. And some of the stories I've had from that are quite fantastical, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, because you don't know if I don't mean people are deliberately lying, but you don't know how far imagination takes over from, the actual reality of the event, do you?
You don't. But if I think, that's a great account, there's a possibility, I believe. So you've got people who are, as long as they believe they're telling the truth, and they answer the questions and say, to the best of my knowledge, then I'll take them at face value. I might not think it's an extraterrestrial craft. I think you saw a planet there or a plane. I've got I'm a big subscriber to a thing called Occam's Razor, which is with all things considered, the simplest solutions tend to be the most correct. So if you see a UFO during a meteorite shower, I'm going to say it's probably a meteorite. And if it was near an airport, it probably was a plane. Doesn't mean it is, but I'll subscribe to the Occam's Razor. But you've got to think of all sorts of things, mate. You've got to think of the Pareidolia effect, where, the light might go over something and onto something else and create a shadow. And those shadows combined with other shadows look like something that isn't there. Like when you were a kid in your bedroom and you look like there's a scary man in the corner with a lampshade. You've got to think of a thing called Fata Morgana, which is where it's a bit like a mirage when you're driving down a road and the heat's off the road. And you get a lot of those UFO sightings out at sea. It was a UFO at sea. And sometimes what it is, it's a ship. It could be hundreds of miles away. And the image of it is projected because of hot air inversions meeting cold air inversions. And if you look at YouTube, there's famous accounts of it where people have seen cities in the sky. Google it in China.
No, we've got reports of it. I found them in archive. You can, where people have actually seen what looks like this hull over the Bay of Bridlington, where it's mirrored it.
It's fascinating. So people need to understand, and you need to discount all of those things, and if you can, then maybe, just maybe, you've got something. Do
you know what, on Cliff Tops we were talking about it other day, not in the night so much because it's difficult, but in the evening time, and you can look at a bank of fog out at sea, and sometimes you can see lights above the fog. Now, I don't mean we're the trained eyes, but we spend enough time up there to know what we're looking at, but you'll see lights above the fog as it's getting dark. And people think that they've seen lights in the sky, and it's not, because that bank of fog is in front of the horizon and those ships are behind it, and it gives the impression that there's a light in sky. Do you know what I mean? And people,
I know exactly what you mean.
Think that they're looking for looking at what they would term a UFO. Got another question here, Roy. Are you okay for time, Roy?
Hey, I will talk until the cows come home if you let me.
All right, well, we'll carry on then. This is good. And this is from Karen. Roy, have you found the paranormal showing itself to you and the more you delve into the multi-topic? Thank you.
I mean, personally, I haven't. I've had one weird experience in 2019, and it was an audible experience. But since then, I've never had nothing hitchhike onto me of a paranormal nature. I'm a big believer in it, but I've only had the one experience, and it was a bit bizarre. But nothing.
Share it with us? Or don't you want to?
No, I don't mind, mate. I'm happy to talk about it. I've told loads of people. Some people laugh at it and take it with a pinch of salt, but I can only explain, what happened to me. And I was on duty on a night shift. I was at Brierley Hill Police Station, which unfortunately we don't have anymore. I think we've sold it off. But anyway, I was there. I was the inspector on response, responsible for the geographical policing on that night shift in that area. And I went down to the DV suite, which is domestic violence suite. There's a sofa in there and there's a load of kiddies' toys. So if we bring back someone and there's been a disagreement and we bring, 9 times out of 10, it's the female part and the kids back, the kids play with the toys while we take a statement off the lady. Most of the times that is how it is. And I'd been in that room and that was just to write some notes on the very comfy sofa there, not fall asleep on it, which of course I never did. But when I left the room, I went upstairs and then I suddenly thought, well, where's my phone? Oh no, I've left it in the DV suite. So I walked back down the stairs and I can hear some voices and I can hear some kids playing in there. And I thought, oh no, so, there's a lady and the kids in there and there'll be some officers taking the statement. Because it had been about 20 minutes since I'd been there. And I thought, they're going to know I've been in there and they're going to think I've been asleep in there, which of course I wasn't.
Right? No, absolutely.
So I put my hand on the door and it's really loud talking. And as soon as I open that and break that door, the seal, those really loud voices of the kids and the adults stop. Like it was a tape recorder being turned off. And when you feel, did that happen? Yes, it did. So I went in, I got my phone. And what I can confirm, there's no air vents in there. There were there's no windows in there, so it wasn't somebody outside. And like I say, no air vents. There was no sound traveling from other rooms. And I really felt that was the only time I've ever had it where I really felt something otherworldly. It had not been seen by me, but it was heard by me. There was no one in any of the adjoining rooms. I checked that straight away, and I went home thinking, did that just happen? And I knew it did. But that's the only thing that's really ever happened to me, and that was 2019, long time ago.
Did it feel surreal because of the sheer strangeness of what had happened, or was there a strange feeling in the air?
Well, afterwards there certainly was, because I felt like the energy of it all, but it was almost a good thing because I actually thought to myself, finally I've experienced something. And it wasn't, there was no normal explanation for it because there was nobody else in that wing of the building. And I checked, it was just me. And that sound wasn't carried there from anywhere else. That sound, Paul, was in that room and it was kids in the room. And I could hear the mumbling adults, but I could hear the kids shouting and, and all the rest of it. And right up until the turning of the in, and then that was it, gone. No noise whatsoever.
It's so strange and fascinating. One of the police officers that I've become quite good friends with, who got in touch with me in 2019 after he'd seen what we call the figure of 8 on the cliff tops. He went actually to, he's straight talking. He says, I went to see what rubbish that bloke in Bridlington were talking. He meant me, obviously. And he went 2019, never been to area, lives up near Hull, Durham, and found himself at the highest point, the trig point, and he's looking down in the darkness, and this figure of 8 appears, which that's what it looked like. He said it had a darker band of red around the middle, and he wouldn't talk about it. And I wrote about it, but I've kept his name. I've changed his name, but he's not so bothered now because obviously I don't know that he's just retired or he's getting ready for retirement. And I took him into the forests in Broxton Forest with us, and I wanted him to meet the witnesses from two witnesses from the documentary Wolflands, which were Jimmy and Steve. And our listeners will have heard me talk about this before. I made no secrets to Jimmy and Steve. I told, he were a serving police officer, but I did say to this chap, just, I'm gonna just sit back and let you talk to him and see what you think afterwards. Because he said to me, I can't believe anything of that nature unless I see it with my own eyes. But a really respectful guy. And with very little sleep in night, Roy. We sat round a fire discussing things, just nodding off occasionally. And he's talked to him all night. And when morning come, says, "What did you think then?" And people know what I'm going to say. And he said, "I told you at the start, I can't believe this unless I see it with my own eyes. But I believe they're telling truth." And it were great. He'd got. His interviewing techniques would have been totally different to mine, how you guys are trained, and I'd got this information out of these men as they told it me, but I knew that he'd mix it up a little bit. And do you deliberately is not the right word. Do you sometimes try and put questions into the people you're talking to see whether the story's bent a little bit to change it?
All the time. I'm probably going to give away some trade secrets. So number one,
well, I do.
Yeah. So the gold standard of interview, Paul, is face to face. You can tell a lot about someone looking them in the eye. That's the gold standard, face to face. If you can't get face to face because they're so far away, the silver standard would be over Zoom, or video like we're doing now, because you can still see someone. Because you want to see the NVCs, which is the non-verbal communication. Can they look you in the eye? Are they looking away? They're fiddling with the fingers and shuffling the feet. All indications they may not be giving you the complete truth. The bronze standard would be, over the phone, where you can't see someone. What I do to answer your question is, somebody might say, I was in my car and I was going from this direction to this direction. I'll write it down. And what I might do towards the end of the account, say, okay, so, you're in your car and you're going from blah, blah to blah, blah. And you were sat in the rear back seat, where they've told me they were going the other way and they're in the rear right seat. Yeah. Now, if they've made it up and they weren't quite sure, they'd go, yes, absolutely. And you think, but not more often than not, they'll say yes, no. I was going this way to this way, and you've got the seat wrong. And I think, yeah, that's what you said.
It's a bit like Columbo, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and at the end, I could just say, just one more thing, and all the rest of it, just like Columbo. But police officers, I always think, what have they got to gain by telling me this? And they've got nothing to gain and everything to lose by coming forward. The risk in the professional credibility.
I think by nature at job, from ridicule. Right. I think by nature at job, you're right, Roy. But I also think that we'd be doing everybody a disservice if we didn't say, what have they got to gain? Joe Public, anybody who steps forward and shares these things. I realise in your position and a police officer's position, then you're dealing with public, and there'll be members at public who might look upon what you believe in and what you look into and think, I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah, it's the issue when, say, for example, you're building a case and you're presenting the evidence before court, and it'll, are you the guy that did such and such or said this, that you saw, a half man, half stag beast, or as a PC told me once, he believed he saw a mermaid type creature down Cayansia Cove in Cornwall. So if they can throw that at you in court, try and question your mental health or whatever, that's why it's a bit more of a risk in the field of police, and I would suggest. But you're right to say that, anybody in any job, because you can be ridiculed by your colleagues no matter what you're doing, or the senior managers of whatever department or business you work for. So I suppose everybody takes that risk when they come forward and tell their stories.
I'm just hoping my wife comes in. You've seen me shuffling about. I'll tell everybody, I've come in with wrong glasses on. To be honest with you, I don't know where I've picked these blooming glasses up, but it's not the ones I normally wear. So I'm hoping she brings me a cup of tea in a minute, and then I can say, just get me glasses. So we've done this, but we're going to do it again because we just are. Al Durham says, where can we buy your book, Roy? And we'll put the cover up, guys.
Thank you. It's at Amazon or Waterstones, absolutely anywhere. Asda bought, I think, 1,500 of them. So go in your local Asda and it'll be there.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. And if anybody contacted you, Roy, do you sign them?
Yeah, sure. If you know, if they were nearby or whatnot, I'd certainly sign them. But I mean,
you're not going to drive 25, 30 miles to sign a book. I get that. It's just something I get asked a lot. And if I send a book out, I'm not that precious that I want any money for signing it. I just sign them and send them out. Every book.
Yeah, the only difference is because I don't possess the books; they're just sent directly from the publisher. Right. So I don't actually have them or send them out. That's the only issue. Not
a problem. And I'm just going to do this while I'm here. We'll remove that because my books, truthproof.uk, for Truthproof books, or The Night People, and you can also get them on eBay, or you can get them on Amazon as Kindle downloads. And if you want the Wolflands documentary, it's on Amazon Prime, or you can get it as an hard DVD. I wish she'd come. Mary, do us a favour, just find me right glasses. I've brought wrong glasses in. It's like I'm going blind. They'll be in house, if please. Yeah, terrible that, you know, really unprofessional, innit? So Amazon or Amazon Prime for the Wolflands DVD, or if you want to go truthproof.uk and you order an hard copy. We never thought that there'd be a demand for DVDs, Roy, and there is, and they're sent out. If I got an order for one tonight, or 2 or 10, they'll be sent out tomorrow. That's how we work it, you know.
Yeah, I bought your Wolflands DVDs. Very, very well made, mate.
Excellent. We're pleased with it. We're really pleased. And a glowing recommendation, Roy, last week was I met up with Dr. David Clark. And as you know, Dave, you might know that David is doctor of folklore and myth and mythology. And he wanted to come through and speak to me. Didn't really tell me what it was about. And I met him and we spent quite a bit of time up at Speeton, walking and talking. And he's interested in Wolflands, which I found it a really good bit of praise to say that he really enjoyed it. And he thought, you know, it was well done. So thank you, David, if you're watching this, because it surprised me. You know, I didn't mean I thought you were coming through to be, I don't know, judgmental or anything, but I just didn't know what it was about. But yeah, really good. So let's move on then, Roy. Questions. So when you're investigating a case, what is your end goal with it? Obviously, you want to tie it up and you want to get it ready for the book. But are you hoping you can pull a little bit more out of the witness, something that they'd not thought about, and do you try and more?
I mean, the majority of the witnesses I interview are pretty good with giving me the evidence, but you know, there's a mnemonic I would use, which is advocate. You know, amount of time under observation, the distance from the object, visibility, obstructions, that type of thing.
Yeah.
You know, where were you stood? Where was the object? Which way were you facing? Speed, trajectory, size, all of that stuff. So I try and grab all that information to put it into statement form, so that the reader has got all of the information, so they can come to their own conclusions. My goal with this, Paul, with a book, or any of these accounts I interview people about, is to get them out into the public eye, so people know this is happening, you know, in the skies above the United Kingdom and all over the world. So when people think, oh, I've seen this, you know, it isn't just them, and it's to raise awareness of the issue, so people know it's a massive phenomena and it's happening, and it's been happening for quite some time. I just want the information out there for people to read.
And thank you, thanks, Roy. I know you're concentrating on the police reports, but you are going to get a lot more, aren't you, from civilians? You're going to get more from different professions. What are you going to do? Are you going to solely stay with the police, do you think?
No. So over the last, as I said before, I've spread into, I've gone from just the police to emergency services like fire and the ambulance.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some really interesting paranormal stuff from people working in the NHS. But, you know, like I say, fire department, Coast Guard would be nice. The military especially. I got contacted by a pilot a couple of days ago about a UFO. He went to investigate over Wales, a triangular one that disappeared. But whether someone's in the military, the emergency services or not, if somebody drops me an email, I'll always speak to them, because their account might be that bit of evidence that I've been missing that bolsters somebody else's account. So don't let, you know, to anybody watching who is not in the military, or, you know, a servant of the crown in the 999 services, if anybody wants to send me an email, you know, contact@policingtheunexplained.com, I'll always answer your emails and I'll always speak to you. So anybody at all, I will answer if they want to speak to me about, a UFO sighting, paranormal stuff, cryptid stuff, anything relating to anything of the unexplained.
So we've got a question here. Roy, do you believe there's a link between UFOs and cryptids?
I don't know. It's neither a yes or no answer because I don't know. Possibly. I just don't know.
It's a difficult one, isn't it?
It's a very difficult one. I believe that both of them exist, but whether they're intertwined and linked, I don't know.
There's big UFO organisation, and I can see probably directions that this lady's put this in, and they'll only deal with UFO cases. So to me, when they get a UFO case and then the witness who's submitted the report or spoken to them says, strange thing that I also saw a bipedal fur-covered creature as well within close proximity or a short time after, that gets disregarded. And to me, there's a chunk of evidence, no matter how unpalatable it might be for you, because you don't want to deal with I don't mean you, Roy, the UFO researcher doesn't want to deal with the cryptid phenomena.
But it may have been that the UFO turned up because of the cryptid phenomena.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
Investigate it, to look at it, much as we would turn up in the jungle to look at, a tiger or a lion. They may know these things exist and where they are and be able to trace them a lot more than we, because they're so much further ahead in regards to their technology. So it might well be they have come to look at a half man, half stag thing or something.
It's got you that one, hasn't it? It's ridiculous, isn't it, that the descriptions people get, and I say that with respect because I've had so many reports now that I know there's a reality to it, but it's just absolutely crazy. We've got another one from Al Durham. He's busy tonight. What would be the best phrasing for a FOIA request to be submitted to a county force to ensure it can't be rejected?
Less is best. If you put a FOIA request in and it's quite complicated, you will probably get a reply from whatever police service replies saying your request will incorporate X amount of police research hours. It's over the allotted amount, so we're not going to do that. So if you want this information, put in a FOIA request for this, and then put in a FOIA request for that.
Yeah, get it.
That's what I would certainly do.
And I don't know whether you're an expert on the Freedom of Information request, but if you wanted some information, let's just say for a certain date, February the 15th, 1979, but you'd not got your dates quite right and you said February the 13th, even if that information were there, do you think they wouldn't even supply you with it? They'd just look at what they'd got and not give you anything else?
They'd look at the date. And if they knew the incident you're referring to was the day before, they wouldn't tell you. And I know because that's happened to me several times. Yeah. So what I would do in that occasion is I would say, if I wasn't sure if it was the 13th, 14th, 15th, I'd say, I believe an incident occurred in between. The 13th, 14th. I'll give that tight window and just say, can you have a look at your logs? Did you have anything from, 001 hours on this date to 23:59 hours on this date of this nature in this area? Thank you, because it's very specific what you're asking for.
Yeah. So that's why I knew with Wilsthorpe, but Roy, that whether it were UFO related or some military activity, I knew it were accurate because I'd got September the 15th, 2009, and it couldn't be dodged, and that's why I got the response back. But I suppose if I'd have said September. If I'd have said September the 12th, I'd have got nothing. Yeah.
And I think sometimes Freedom of Information requests, whoever's looking into it, sometimes I've had it where they're quite lax. I mean, I did some NPAS inquiries saying, can you tell me why the police helicopter launched at this time on this date and went to this location? And then I got, the reply 28 days later was, no, there was no such launch on that date from NPAS. So then I reply saying, you're wrong, because I've looked at flight radar, and there's some other sites. ADBS is another one, and I sent a screenshot saying, well, you launched at this time to this time, so you did. And then I've had, we're very sorry, yes, we did, we've made an error, and this is the reason why. So sometimes you've got to, I think sometimes they're genuinely mistaken. So sometimes it's worth, if you think no, I know, sometimes it's worth putting it in again.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we've got another question. Okay with these questions, Roy? Miles Palmer, the military do not test the tech in public places. No, we're doing it for 500 years. Oh, you're on about going back 500 years. Well, I suppose Miles is talking about the things that are seen that we would deem as military tech that are seen over civilian areas. And
yeah, and Miles makes a good point, because why would the military risk exposing some of their most secret top, craft that they want to hide whilst it's being developed? Why would they show it in these areas where, people are? I've had all sorts of people see flying triangles, huge ones, in areas where, they're just on the edge of densely populated villages and towns. Well, why would you risk that? You wouldn't. You'd be doing it over Salisbury Plain, and you'd probably even make sure that there were no troops testing out there at the time, and you would just test it there. You'd go up to the Highlands of Scotland where there was nobody.
I 100% agree.
So he makes a good point. Why would, so there's that to consider as well.
Yeah, there's one in, I think it was 2014, Hummonby, and I think you know where Hummonby is. Roy, you'll have been around that area in North Yorkshire. And this thing was seen on the Valley Bridge at Hummonby, a huge, not on the bridge, but going over the Valley Bridge, huge boomerang-shaped object. Then it was seen in the village of Hummonby. Farmers were ringing each other, saying it's heading towards your farm, it's heading towards your farm. And, there were a pattern of events, and I spoke to most farmers, and they wouldn't have flown something, surely some military tech, like you just said, overpopulated area like that.
No, especially now when everybody's got a mobile phone and can film it. Why would they do that?
What do you say then to people who literally jump on that? Well, Roy, if there's so many, everybody's got a phone, there's CCTV everywhere, there's dash cams everywhere. How come we've got no visual evidence of these things?
But we have got a lot of visual evidence of these things. That's the thing. So, we have particularly the military and stuff, but because they keep away, I guess, from populated areas, or they're at such an altitude, you don't get the best picture, or their technology is such that, I've spoken to people who on a police helicopter who've seen a UFO, a triangular one near Kethern Mabley in 2006. And they state that the UFO was a mile in length from corner to corner to corner, but they could see the M4, loads of traffic, but nobody else reported it. So, I was of the opinion if the incident was as described, that there was some sort of technology where below the object you couldn't see it, but because the helicopter was at a certain altitude, it could. So there could be all sorts of reasons why we don't see them and we haven't got the pictures. And when we do, they're blurred or not the best. That's the only answer I can come up with.
And I wonder why they're so blurred as well. But I suppose if we talk, and I'm not a man of science, am I? But if we're talking about something that's interdimensional or just in a thin area where these things pass, as you spoke about earlier, then you might get that kind of distortion when you're trying to take a picture. And that sounds like an excuse, doesn't it? But
or maybe it wasn't distorted and it looked good to the eye, but it's distorted the mechanism of the camera that's filming it.
Yeah. So you looked at loads of cases then, Roy, a lot more than just the ones that are in your book. Are there any that you find really, really puzzling? Do you want to share? Our listeners love accounts. Do you want to share another one with us, and we'll do a few more questions?
I've had I've had so many. They're all. I would say they're all puzzling. I could talk all day. I'm trying to think. There's one that particularly interested me back in, and the guy didn't see the UFO. It's a guy called PC Hope. And at the time, before he was in the police, he was based at RAF Benbecula, which was an early warning radar system for the detection of Russian ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Very important job. And he was a radar tech. And he had to be on duty sometimes at night in case there's a problem with the radar. So one of the radar techs radar operators runs in and says, "Can you come here next door quick?" So he runs in, and there's a blip on the radar. And there's a sweep of the radar every 10 seconds with one of those white lines that goes around in a circle. You've probably seen on films. So it highlights where something is in the sky. When it comes around 10 seconds later, it highlights it again. So you can see the direction it's moving. And the last thing is a little bit less white. So you can see the pattern across the screen. Now, this object, whatever it was, it passed from the circumference of the radar, where it could reach from the one side to the other in between 70 to 80 seconds.
You can calculate its speed then.
Yeah, so it was 640 miles in that speed. So let's say it was 80 seconds. So that object did 28,800 miles an hour. Now, bear in mind, that was 1993, and we're in 2026, and the quickest thing we've built so far is the hypersonic glide vehicle, that Russian nuclear missile that can do Mach 21. So, like I say, that's 22,000-ish miles an hour, and we've got something in 1993 that's been tracked on radar that was doing 28,800. Now, he was asked if there was a fault with the radar, and he and another person examined it and were told, no, there's nothing wrong with it. Now, years and years later, he joined the police, he's since retired, so he feels free to talk about it. But he was told at the time, and they were taken into a room the next day and told, that didn't happen, and you don't talk about it. And obviously they did, because they're all mates, aren't they? And, you know, in the military, you're going to talk, but it was in quiet corridors and, you know, the corners of rooms. So I found that a particularly fascinating one from a really reliable witness who was highly trained in the RAF to examine radar systems. And he said, whatever that was absolutely 100% there doing that speed in 1993.
Do you feel privileged when somebody shares that kind of information with you? I always do.
I do, and especially when they go, and I always try to convince them to go and give the names, and some are like, no, and I've managed to convince a few. I think I had about 20 that went anonymous, and then I managed to persuade 11 to then give the names, and so there's only 9 in the end that went anonymous. But yeah, it is a privilege because I'm getting their accounts out there, so it is good. And I'd suggest most of the accounts that I'm talking about are, although there might be back in time and they might be old, these are the first times that a detailed statement's been taken and the first time that the accounts are being put out there in the public eye.
Okay, so we are going into detail, and this is probably going to be a yes or a no. Have you had any former criminals, should we say, come forward and give you information about strange things they've seen in Sky?
No, I've never had that. I've had an incident in 2010 where there were some criminals, if you like. There was a fight in the street between 2 warring families in Birmingham, and the police went. There were a number of arrests were made, and while the disorder was going on, someone shouts out, "Look!" So everybody looks up, and PC McHugh, West Midlands Police, sees, along with everybody else, a J-shaped UFO in the sky, and because of the strangeness of it, everybody stopped fighting. So you could argue there's an element there of people breaking the law who've also seen this, who've reported it, and at the same time as the police. I personally call that the only fools and horses UFO, on the basis that you've got a disorder going on, the UFO turns up and it stops the disorder, and I call it the only fools and horses UFO because
the Galactic Police.
Well, there's a very famous scene where there's a riot on Only Fools and Horses, and Del Boy paps his horn on the Reliant Robin, and all the rioters stops, and he drives through the middle and it quells the disorder. And that's what happened there in 2010. So, but I've never had somebody say, "Hello, Inspector Teague. I'm Joe the burglar. I'm going to tell you about a UFO." But if Joe the burglar did, I would listen to him.
Yeah.
Hasn't happened yet, though.
Well, people reform, don't they? You know, people change. I've got an incredible case, which I'm not going to talk about today in any detail whatsoever, but I'll do it on one of live streams of two prisoners, and I'll give you guys when we're listening in a week or two's time the prison and everything, and they claim they were abducted in their cell.
Crikey, that sounds intriguing. It
is intriguing, yeah, and they're talking about it with all the right terminology about the clock here and everything. Do you know what I mean? And it's an interesting one. I don't think I've ever spoke about it, but talking to you has just brought it to mind. Let's just have a look at this. Hi, Paul. Can you ask Inspector Teague if cases of UFOs have increased or decreased over time? So, for me, I mean, I think UFOs have been going on, been spotted since the beginning of time. There's drawings of them in caves and all sorts of stuff. And I've said this on a couple of chats I've had online before, that it's my opinion that UFO sightings increased exponentially in 1945 when we split the atom and we dropped nukes on our own soil in anger for the first time. And I think that was the case of look what they've
they've done and accomplished.
There's another step forward, yeah. And it's not.
Yeah, there's a danger here, and especially if they take that technology into space. And we're advancing so fast, Paul. I mean, apparently there's more technology in your iPhone than there is on the Challenger space shuttle. So we're in 200 years ago, if you'd have said, oh, you can jump into a tin can and go from here to Australia and fly there, people think you were mad. So imagine where we'll be in another 200 years. And if we're that advanced and then we're taking weaponry like that into space, or we're going into the far reaches of space, and we've got that technology, we've become a threat. And I think that's why since 45, we've been monitored heavily and a lot. I believe that UFO sightings have also increased because of misdiagnosis, because I believe we've recovered several UFO craft, particularly the Americans, and we've back engineered it. And a lot of the stuff that's been seen is back engineered craft that we've learned how to build and make and all the rest of it. So definitely since 45, it's increased. And I just think that since then it's been steady, and it particularly increases in volume in areas of conflict like World War II or over the Ukraine now. There's a lot of reports of it now. And I know they've got their own drones up there because they're using drones in warfare now, aren't they? And it's really changed, field warfare and open warfare now, just dropping drones that are blowing up tanks. A drone costing $2,000 is destroying a £3 million tank. But so I don't mean those drones. You've probably got non-human tech drones looking at
observing
our drones, what we're doing and blowing things up and how we're advancing. So it's always when there's a time of war or conflict that these sightings
we're strange, aren't they? And it makes you wonder. I mean, we don't know motives of these visitors, the unknown others. We don't really know their motives. Some people claiming to be abducted have horrifying experiences. I mean, that's why I wrote Night People. My experiences as a child were horrible, but there's other people who have great experiences. But if they're looking at us, the human race, I don't know, from wherever they are, and they see us, we literally just fire rockets up into the air and at each other. We just blow it. It's crazy, isn't it? What we're capable of and what we are. At least in the animal kingdom, they'll do it for hierarchy or they'll do it for food. We I don't know what we do it for half the time.
Oil and power.
Oil and power, yeah.
That's all it is, really. I mean, and if you think about it, if we had the technology to go to another planet, we would think, right, we can go and talk to them. So they probably thought that, but when they come here, what do they get? They get about 250, 300 different countries where there's a different boss and none of us can get on with each other. And there's always a big fight going on somewhere.
Oil and power.
That's probably why they're not ready to
interact.
Talk to us, because we're so childish, aren't we?
Absolutely, we are. Question from our moderator here, Lee. Question, Roy, did you notice everyone in the background keeping their eye on you on these reports by any chance? Thanks for your time tonight.
I'm going to assume that means in the context of the police.
I think so, yeah. I think.
Yeah, I did, but there was nothing, nasty or untoward. I just had a couple of comments. I get the mickey taken out of me by, the PCs and the officers in the trenches and all that. But I love a bit of banter, so I don't mind that. I've had a couple of, people I really respect, sort of senior officers say, "Oh, be careful of that one, mate, because it might be construed as this or that." And I had somebody once saying, it's not a police matter, really. I'd write about something else. I'm like, well, what about kidnapping and abduction? They're police matters. Well, it's not the same. And, so I just think they were probably just looking out for me, thinking, well, your professional reputation, you're investigating this. How's it going to look? I unfortunately do think, because of my interest in UFOs and the paranormal and things that go bump in the night, I just think I've lost, I don't know, people take me a little bit less seriously now in the police than what they did. But I did think about that before I got into bed with this subject. So there was a guy, El Paso Reserve Deputy Sheriff Chuck Sikowski, and there was a series of cattle mutilations, and he attributed, and the police attributed those as potential predators, like wolves, etc. And he had a website, and he challenged that and said he believed that might be down to, a UFO issue. So he put that online, and 2 days later, on February the 9th, 2011, 2 Colorado sheriff's deputies turned up at his house, relieved him of his gun and his badge, and told him he was fired for contradicting a police forum with his findings. So things like that there are at the back of your mind. Alan Godfrey had a hard time, according to his book, when he spoke about his abduction. he claimed that there were Class A drugs placed in his locker, and he was getting a hard time from the organisation. No, I've never had anything like that. I mean,
No.
apart from a bit of banter and a bit of people saying, just be careful. I haven't had anything negative, and I've enjoyed it. I've never experienced anything like that. But of course, I am going to be careful about what I say.
You've got to be, yeah. You've got to be, and I can't fault you. And that's why any questions that come your way via my mouth, it can be a yes or a no, or I'd rather not say. It's good enough. You were okay with these questions, though, aren't we, Roy? Yeah. Evening, Roy. Do you know offhand what police force has had the most sightings?
I mean, no, I seem to get a lot from West Yorkshire. I attribute that to the fact that it's an area at night where some of these areas are not very well built up. So there's no light pollution, and you get officers on these roads when it's pretty dark, so you can see further. And I think a lot of times these, whatever they are and wherever they're from, they come to isolated areas. I don't know. A lot of times they're seen over bodies of water. I don't know whether that's a power source for them or whatever. But I personally had a lot from West Yorkshire. But unless I suppose we know every single police sighting and put them into, some sort of journal, it would be impossible to say.
Some data crunching.
Yeah, and also you got to appreciate some police forces are a lot bigger than the other. I mean, the Met, for example, the Metropolitan Police, huge force, 30,000 plus officers, and then you might go to Cambridge with a couple of thousand. So it depends.
What about military police then, Roy? Have you had reports from military police?
So I've had a couple, but only because the military police went on to then join the civilian police. So I had a guy, and I forget his name off the top of my head, but he was on Salisbury Plain with another member of the Royal Military Police, and they heard like a humming, but it sounded like, when your fridge door's closed, but you can still hear it working.
Yeah.
And they felt like a static electricity, and they were stood outside their Land Rover, and it was dark, and then the humming got louder. So they were thinking it was something coming down the trail with the lights on they couldn't see. And then when it got a little bit louder is when they both realized it was coming from above them, and they looked up, and again it was a huge matte black flying triangle gliding over the heads. I mean, who's to say whether that was non-human tech or whether that was something we were testing, because that would be a brilliant opportunity for the military to test something on Salisbury Plain at night. But then again, I would question, why would you do it? Surely if you're going to test it, you're going to know if there's any any army operations on Salisbury Plain. So why would you risk it? Or did they do it deliberately to see what the RMP would say, if anything?
Yes, see what effect it had on the people involved. Psychologically or not, are they going to say anything?
Well, a couple of RMP, but only because they later went on to be police officers, as in civilian police officers. So
have you investigated any cases where officers have had dash cam footage or body cam footage of anything?
Only I personally haven't. I mean, there's stuff online that you can see that's recorded on a dash cam on an officer's car on a motorway, but it's just like a light that's going really quick. But I personally haven't had anything from an officer saying I've got some body-worn video of a UFO. And also, I've got to be careful because you can only look at police systems
if there's a valid reason
in the capacity of a police officer. It's got to be for police reasons. So the last thing I'm going to start doing
absolutely
is looking at that and putting myself on offer. And it wouldn't be right either. So it's got to be
in fairness, Roy, I didn't ask that. I didn't know if anybody had come to you and said, "Look, I've captured this on a body cam," and just spoke to you about it.
No, I've never had that, buddy. I've never had it. But that would be quite good, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what about officers that have claimed to have had any physical effects from interaction with not UFO or paranormal type events? Any of that?
No, it's just predominantly it's the effect on them mentally, and not, when I say mentally, I don't mean mentally in a negative sense. I mean mentally as in, a lot of people, when they had these experiences, like for example UFOs, to them it was like the light had gone off, because in their opinion they realized that it was at that point they realized we weren't alone. And then for people who've had some really interesting paranormal incidents, it was at that point they realized that there is something that comes after. And a great another campfire great story for you. I spoke to
Please
a
tell us.
nurse. I spoke to a nurse. Her name's Amanda. She used to work at the Royal Hospital in Wolverhampton, not far from me. And her job on the one evening was to run down with a vial of blood. There was somebody very poorly, so the doctors would get a vial of blood. They'd hand to the nurse. They'd have to run through the hospital to a specific room, put it into a machine. It would analyze it very quick and give a printout of the person's blood, and that would hopefully diagnose what was wrong with them, so they could get the treatment. Now, as she's going into, she's going through one room and into another room. The room she's in is dark, and the room beyond it, the lights are fully on where the machine is, and there's no windows or doors in that room. And she goes to push open a plastic door, and it's one of the doors that bends in, because they used to push hospital trolleys through them, right? You know the types I mean. And you can see about 95% the way through the door. And just as she puts her hand on the door to push through, she said to me, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. In that room was stood a woman, but in a full outfit of a nun, but the old nun with the habits on. You know, that the hats that do this, black and white, and she could even see the rosary beads. And this nun was side on, couldn't see through her. It looked like a physical person was there, and her brain was like, "Why is there a nun there?" And while she was thinking about it, she was looking at this nun, and then this nun disappeared. Didn't walk out of sight or run up, just bang, disappeared. And then she's thinking, "I don't want to go in there, but I've got to, because I've got to get this blood in the machine." So she runs in, puts the blood in, back to the wall, presses the button to do whatever the machine's got to do, gets the result, runs out, and tells a load of people. They come back to the room, and there's nothing there. It wasn't a reflection from somebody behind her, because the lights were out in the room she was in. And she said that was an interesting experience, but it didn't prove anything to her. She just thought, my eyes are seeing something. 3 weeks later, she's in the chapel of rest, because there's a lady that's passed away in there, and the deceased mom and the deceased sister's in there, and they come to see their daughter, and the lady starts talking to Amanda and keeps looking over Amanda's shoulder. So the nurse, Amanda, says, "Why do you keep looking over my shoulder?" And the woman says, "Well, I didn't mention this, but I am a medium and I've got some abilities, and I see things people can't, whether you believe that or not." And so Amanda sort of laughs a little bit and says, "Well, what do you see?" And the woman says, "Well, there's somebody behind you that followed you into the room." And so Amanda says, "Well, what does this person look like?" And the woman said, "Well, it's a woman dressed as a nun." And she said that was a really defining moment for her.
Absolutely.
That backed up what she'd seen. I'd never seen it before or since. Now, these are credible people, again, who've got nothing to gain and everything to lose. So I just find these stories absolutely fascinating. There's no way I can prove them, Paul, at all.
I think we're all in the same boat, though.
Yeah.
We can't prove it, but
it gives me a lot of pressure, pleasure, sort of writing them down and bringing them, into the public domain. And the last one I can tell you, and this really will blow your socks off, mate. I spoke to a guy, and what I bring to the party here is I can name these people, right? So it's not, oh, an officer did this on this date, and don't tell you where it is. I'm telling you, so Sergeant Michael Davis, and this was at the late 60s. And he goes to a very bad car crash on the A45 near Birmingham Airport. It was called something different back then. It wasn't international, but that's by the by. And what's happened is one car has gone into the back of another. Now, as he gets there, he was one of the force leads on fatal RTCs, road traffic collisions. As he gets there, there's a lady sat on a pavement holding a tissue to her head with a big cut and some blood coming out of it. It was obvious she'd got out of one of the cars. So you can see the cut's bad. So he opens first aid kit in his car very quick, runs over to her, and he hands her a lint bandage, which is better than a piece of tissue. And without looking at him, she takes it off him, puts it on her head. He runs back to the one car, tells there's a man and a woman in there. Look, get yourselves out. No seatbelts in those days. So they've both got chest injuries because they've gone and hit the car. They've gone into the back of a car and they've got some damage. He then goes to the other car, and there's a man and he's holding the steering wheel and his chest is hit there. So as he's getting the man out, the man says, "Get my wife out." He goes, so he helps the man to the pavement, runs around to the door, opens the passenger door of the car, and the woman, there's a big spider web on the windscreen where her head's hit it. She's slumped into the footwell of the car, and as he moves her back, she's wearing the exact same clothes as the lady he's just given the bandage on the pavement. Bandage. Yeah, and he said before he even turned around, he knew that woman wasn't going to be there, and the woman in the car was clearly deceased, and he did turn around, and the woman wasn't there. So, but I've heard these myths before and little tales, but it's always an officer in Merseyside or somebody down at Devon Cornwall. You never get to the nuts and bolts of who these people are. So when you get somebody come forward and gives you the, you know, name, rank, and you interview them in person and they tell you the story and they trust you to write it down and tell people about it and they're okay with it, it does feel really, really good. I think sometimes, and this is what he said, some people pass so quickly and they haven't achieved everything they want to do in life. They're not ready to go, and they have that minute or two, and they assume that that's what happened on that occasion with that woman, and then poof, she's just gone. That's
a big jump from your UFO account.
Well, this is the type of thing. This is the type of thing that I'm getting now. So I'm sort of I guess a jack of all trades and master of none. I bounce around all the different.
What do you see yourself as, Roy? Obviously, police officer, but what do you see yourself? What is your role? You, not just as an author of writing these books. Do you feel at times like you're almost like a counsellor?
Sometimes I think people just want to get it off their chest, and it's a relief to them to finally talk to someone who's willing to, you know, believe them and get their accounts out there. But I do know that probably 99% of these accounts would never be in the public domain if I wasn't in the same profession that the majority of the witnesses are. So that has been a plus, being in the police, because it's law enforcement interviewing law enforcement. So that has helped massively.
Superb.
I just want to get the stories out there, but so people understand there's something else there's something out there that we don't quite understand.
And do you think we ever will? You know, I have a feeling we're still going to be not quite understanding it when I've long gone. You know, it strikes me that there's some incredible people out there before me, before you, who've been investigating this subject and never got any further with it. And it don't frustrate me, because I can see it in your eyes, and we can hear, everybody in chat can hear it in your voice, and there's an enthusiasm and a passion for what you're doing. So, and I feel like that myself. So I don't mean I'm not bothered if I never got the answers. Obviously we want the answers, but it's every case is a new adventure, if that makes sense, because you're hearing something that's packing a little bit more meat on the bone around the subject, and that's what it's all about. Can we do a few questions, Roy?
Sure thing.
Yeah. They're in caps, so I'm tipping they should be okay. Most drone pilots can make their drone do things that what planes cannot do. People get mistaken on what they see. By the way, I am a drone pilot. Thank you.
I'd agree with that. So, I mean, have you seen some of these drone shows? So, you know, when you throw up 100 or 200 drones, you could probably make 100 drones into the shape of a huge UFO, you know, and all the rest of it. So I do think there's a lot of misdiagnosis with drones. So I think, you know, the person who's called in with that is probably right. But so then I'd have to look at, well, what was, you know, if it was drones, where were these drones? And the operator's usually within, you know, like a couple of 100 meters of them. So if it was in the middle of Salisbury Plain, for example, and I wouldn't be thinking it was, you know, drones, because there's nobody within 2 miles of them. But I do think that, yeah, I am absolutely sure on occasions that drones are misdiagnosed as UFOs. It's highly probable, and that is why it's on one of the lists that I've got to rule out.
There were a wave of drone sightings around airports, weren't they? I can't remember. It's not long since, is it? A few years ago, and we went up to Staxton World Radar Base, did a bit of observing around there, and we were seeing orbs. We were looking probably a mile into distance, so it's difficult to get anything with any real clarity. But I got feeling whether we were looking at drones, but I don't know, unless it was military, they wouldn't be flying them around radar base. Do you know what I mean? They'd never get away with it, would they? No,
so again, back to the Occam's razor, what's the most, you know, the simplest solution tends to be the most correct. So I would suggest that probably was drones from the military, and they'll probably find them up there so they could have a look at the top of the radar dish to see if there was any damage, or to see if the radar would detect that drone. It could have been all sorts. So, and as I say, unless you can tick everything off the rule out list, like drones, meteors and planets, you've never got conclusive proof. So I think drones do play a big part of it. And of course, you're right, mate. You alluded to it. We had all those drones over American military bases, didn't we, about a year ago, 18 months ago? You know.
Do you get many reports, Roy, of what I've called the car chasers, similar to a football-sized sphere of light that's trailing cars down lonely roads? I get a lot of that on North Yorkshire moors. You know.
Yeah, I mean, the one I had. I had the one from. it was the late. In fact, I think it was 73 with PC Flanagan, David Flanagan, and he was coming down the A19, and he was heading towards a bridge, and both sides of the dual carriageway were like grass banks, and he could see a glow from the one side of the side of the grass bank, and he believed there was a fire because of the glow over the bank in the field. So the plan was to come off at the next junction and come and go and have a look. And as they're about to come off the junction, whatever was causing the glow, it was like a huge sphere, came over the bank, came down onto the opposite side of the carriageway, and kept pace and followed, PC Flanagan's car. And he said it was so hot you could feel the heat inside of the car. But this thing followed them for 3 miles. When they sped up, it sped up. When they slowed down, it slowed down. And eventually, they got off at the junction of the A1. There's like a slip road. So they got off there, and then and the radio didn't work, by the way, when they're in the car. They're trying to call it in. When he gets out the car, he parks up because they think they've lost it. They get out. And then they look, and about 50 meters away from them, this thing's hovering above the trees, and then it zips towards them, zips off at a right angle turn and off down the A1. And they reported it. People were, the usual stuff over the radio, and the next thing is it started to come in. The same type of reports were coming in of a UFO sign all the way from their location all the way up into and including Police Scotland. Which would have been Grampian Police in different force areas then. So, that's one of them. The spheres one does interest me because we seem to see a lot more of them these days.
Because we can only second guess as to what the motives would be. What are they getting from pacing a motor vehicle? And do you know?
I know.
I don't know if anybody in chat's got anything that.
There's the theory that it could be UFO, but it could also be a life form that lives here that we don't even know what they are, because you see some very small spheres and some very big spheres. We just don't know, do we?
Well, do you know, Roy, my first website, which were 2004-ish, that I started, were called ILF UFO, and that was intelligent light forms, because of the spheres of light that we were observing on the East Yorkshire Wolds, and they just seemed to be an awareness to them. Yeah. And we never saw anything structured. There could have been something within the light that we didn't know about, but there just seemed to be an awareness to lights. So you've just hit on that. Right, let's have a look at this, Roy. We've got about 9 minutes. How worried should we be, as we obviously do not have the capability to deal with them?
Yeah, so I'm not worried at all, because if these things or craft had any hostile intention, I wouldn't be talking to you on this podcast now. No. Because we wouldn't be here, because whatever they are so far in advance of our human tech, we wouldn't stand a chance. So if they were of hostile nature, we'd have lost years ago. So I think this is just a monitoring thing, a bit like Star Trek and the Prime Directive. There's the zoo hypothesis where they just watch us and see us develop as a species, that type of thing. So I don't think there's any hostile intent.
No. Do you think it were wise to send our DNA blueprint and all the information about us into space?
We took a chance, didn't we? But
I think so. We could be just a crop.
Yeah. But the thing is, we've got to take a leap of faith. We've got to reach out and say hello, and we've got to take that risk. Otherwise, we might never find out, and nobody might ever come here and all the rest of it. I personally think we sent it out, and they've already been here, and they're coming here anyway.
Yeah.
You could argue that we're giving, intelligence about ourselves away, and all the rest of it. But you could argue that. Okay,
Roy, is there any particular part of the country that sticks out as a UFO hotspot for police sightings, or are they all relatively evenly spaced out around the country? It says eventually, but evenly.
Yeah. So as I say before, they're all over, hit and miss, but I did have a lot from the West Yorkshire area. But they could be absolutely anywhere, over the 43 different police forces in England and Wales, and then Police Scotland. So I haven't found a pattern at all.
No. I don't even know if you've got an opinion on this, but do you think they could import viruses, diseases into Earth's atmosphere?
That is that's not a bad question, because we don't know what's out there. We're learning new things all the time. What happens if something out in space interacts with your DNA and you bring something back and then that changes it and then that is a disease and then it's spread? I mean, I always never say never. Never say never. I don't think there'd be something in space, but you never know. But maybe if you sent a probe to another planet or through a planet's atmosphere and then it came back and then we imported whatever it was in the atmosphere, because we have microbes and all sorts in our atmosphere, or in our soil. Who's to say there isn't something on Mars soil and then we come back? And I think it's a valid question and we don't know. I mean, I don't know what the procedures are when these craft get back here, and NASA get hold of them. Do they quarantine them? Do they approach them wearing big spacesuits and all the rest of it? I don't know. No idea, but it is possible.
Excellent. And I think, I'm not seeing the name, but I think John Hanson's maybe in, because I see Lee's just flagged it up in capital letters. So if you are, John, good to see you. And I know that you're a friend of John's. Margaret Hughes is in. Dave Barker. Dave, I put a freedom information request in for Dave Barker's sighting from Flamborough, Roy, and I got everything that we wanted from it. Just by the way you were talking earlier, you've got to be accurate. And Dave had his sighting. He'd got the time he called the police. He'd got the time the Coast Guard called. They just couldn't avoid it. Do you know what I mean? They had to give me the information. So, if you want to reiterate on that little bit about freedom information requests for anybody that's listening here now, there are well over 300 people in.
I would say less is best. Don't ask for too much, because that can be used as an excuse to then refuse it completely and you'll get nothing. Because they'll say it will take too many police hours to give you the answers that you want. So I would ask for, a little chunk, get that, ask another little chunk, and or if you're part of a group, I'd say, well, can you put the information request in for this part? Can you put it in for this? And can you put it in for this? And just put it in sort of at the same time. And it's 3 different requests, isn't it? Albeit it might be about one large thing, but each individual request will only require the police to look at it with a certain amount of hours,
and you'll get there, won't you?
Less is best. And if you're not happy with the reply, I'd resubmit it, in a respectful manner, saying, look, I've got really good intelligence this happened, and you've said no. I would politely ask you to re-look at that, because I mean, the police are only human. They might have made a mistake, and they might have missed something. Yeah,
absolutely. Lawson Richards. Roy, have many police officers seen a paranormal incident which has been logged and can't be explained? Which has been logged, can't be explained. I suppose you've got to be careful with terminology, haven't you?
Yeah, I think if somebody was on duty and they saw something they believed to be, like a ghost or a paranormal entity, I can't see that officer entering on the log. I went to, the house where there was some banging heard and I saw a paranormal entity. I can't ever see an officer putting that on. I've had a few people who've been to calls who then contacted me and said, I got that call. There was nothing criminally going on, but whilst there I saw this. We just closed the log. There were no criminal offences. He said, but this happened. So, but they won't put, I can't see them putting that on the log.
I would agree. I've got a friend who's a Coast Guard, quite high up in Coast Guard, and he said to me, Paul, you will never see a Coast Guard log that said went out to incident of UFO sighting, or we write a report up that says the word UFOs. He says we're trained in what not to say.
The issue is it's the word UFO, because when people say the word UFO, everybody thinks spacecraft from another planet, but it doesn't mean that. It just means unidentified flying object, because we don't know what it is. But it's even that, because of what it's become and what people now think it means, they just think spacecraft. People don't even want to put that into a log, do they?
No, absolutely. And do you know, when you're looking at other cases, I've looked at quite a lot of lifeboat logs, and you might have heard me talking about it. We might have done it last time you were on, but you've got multiple agencies going out because police officers, Coast Guard, trained observers have seen unusual lights over the sea, potentially flares from an aircraft or a ship in distress, and they go out. They put different light boats from different areas in close proximity, Hornsey, Whitby, out to sea, and nothing's found. And on the log it says false alarm with good intent.
Yeah,
And-
well, it could. Yeah, so always we say area search no trace, ASNT, but it doesn't mean it wasn't there when the call came in, and it could be as we go there, like criminals do burgling houses, they scarper and leave before we get there. Who is to say? But why would somebody make something up like that? There's some strange lights out at such and such, especially the Coast Guard, because I mean the Coast Guard are different. They're duty bound to go out for safety reasons to have a look, aren't they?
But they wouldn't go out to sea for nothing, would they?
No, they wouldn't.
You know, so I believe there's a wealth of information within those logs that there's probably not enough to become the smoking gun of ufology, but there's a large amount of evidence that could point to the direction that something very unusual is taking place, and it just seems like a sweeping statement to say false alarm with good intent. You know, there's no write up and detailed account of what they've seen. They've gone out to lights over the sea. But I'm rambling, so let's just try this. We're nearly there, Roy, with this, so I don't want to keep you too long. Have you investigated any reports of involvement of high strangeness at Cannock Chase?
Yes, I have, but not through being contacted by police officers. I've gone there because it's not far from where I live. Lovely place, Cannock Chase, but there's so many stories, UFOs, wolf-like creatures, the black-eyed girls is one, the pig man is another one. There's so many paranormal cryptid UFO stories surrounding there that I know a lot of them. So I like to go out and have a look and say, well, I've been to that place and I can see what they might have made a mistake. They might have got it wrong. They might have confused it with pie green tower with some lights on the top, or you can see some houses through these trees, so it could have been that or X, Y, Z. So I haven't had anyone report those things to me. But I've gone in my own, because of my own research, I've just gone to have a look.
Yeah, thank you. Well, before we close this down, Roy, we're going to put the cover of the book up again. We've not done it much throughout this stream, so that's Roy's book. Anybody that wants to purchase it, and come on, Roy, just give it to us one more time.
As in the email, if you want to contact me, it's contact.
Oh, there it is. There's the email.
There you go. Contact@policingtheunexplained.com. So contact@policingtheunexplained.com. If you want to send me an email about anything paranormal, UFO, cryptid, anything unexplained, you want to talk about it, you don't have to be in the police or any of the emergency services, the military. Just give us an email and I'll get back to you.
That is brilliant. And anybody who's in chat tonight who hasn't pressed the like and subscribe, it's totally free, as I say, every week. So show us a bit of support. Roy's given us 2 hours of his time, and I have, and we've got the moderators, and we've really enjoyed speaking with you guys. Will you come back, Roy?
I will indeed. And can I just add, because if I don't, my good buddy who's probably watching this tonight, Mark Chapman, if you're watching, hello, mate. And what he will say is, you did not say you had a YouTube channel. So I'll create a YouTube channel, and that is Policing the Unexplained. So if you look at Policing the Unexplained, I put my first video on last week, Paul. If I could just unashamedly plug Policing.
Please do. That's what
the Unexplained.
Listen, Roy, you've given us 2 hours of your time. Let's talk about it.
But it's a YouTube channel. So Policing the Unexplained. Click on there. You'll know it's mine because there's a picture of me, very similar to the one you very kindly just put up, Paul. And if you click on there, I would be absolutely thrilled to bits if you could click onto that YouTube channel, Policing the Unexplained.
Just
and like and subscribe. Just like and subscribe. So I've got about 105 subscribers, and I'll put a video on every month or so to keep interest, and we'll move forward. And hopefully, I'll get some decent numbers on there. But yeah, Policing the Unexplained YouTube channel.
Roy, thank you for spending some time with us tonight, and I can't wait to speak to you the next time. And everybody in chat, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye bye. Is this an adventure or what? We don't need unexplained phenomena. I hope you guys are enjoying this journey we're taking you on. I know you come expecting to hear about big cats, cryptids, UFOs. We will touch on some of that, but I think it's worth sharing some of this with you, don't you? There's only 2 living souls up here today.
Because I can see it in my mind, I can see it in my head what I saw, but I can't describe.
Our eyes was closed, like a brightish light in my face, and I just felt paralysed.
Someone said there's something out there, so we had a look. It looked like a walnut. That's the only way I can describe it.
It was like it had loads of tiny little windows all over it, and it had lights in those windows, but not a light that illuminates.
Anyway, we were ushered into this lounge. This fella come in, he said, whatever you saw was a weather effect.
And everything is deathly silent. There's no sea, there's no wind, there's no night noise because, you know, there's foxes all over here. There's nothing.